Well, I wish I could take credit. I've only been here 14 years, and you know, my boss, who is the CFO, he's been here 25. The president's been here 35 years, and you know, a couple of years ago, we said goodbye. A person who retired, I call her my office neighbor. She was here for 62 years. 62 years. And that to me is just amazing. And so while I can't take credit for any of that, I think it's just, again, it starts from the top in terms of, you know, our president, in terms of, you know, in terms of what he values, and, you know, one is accountability. And I think just, I think wherever you step in, if you have a question, I can go to my CFO and say, well, tell me a little bit more. And he's not going to direct me to, you know, maybe one of his direct reports. He's going to sit with me and say, and explain this. This is how it's done. And, you know, you can walk into any department and you'll get that experience. So I think it's just a culture of helpfulness, if you will. So I think that's where it starts.
Don's comments that, you know, it does come from the top. I think culture is defined by the behaviors an organization consistently practices. And I think the leaders drive that behavior. And you know, you can define what a culture looks like. You can have, you know, where we believe in, you know, open communication, and we believe in this, but it's really, the words don't mean anything unless you have the behaviors behind it. So if you look at, I think one of the easiest examples is safety. So if you are an organization that says you have a safety culture and you practice safety, but your leaders walk out on the operational floor without safety glasses, or they don't have safety shoes, or they go wandering around outside of the yellow lines, that diminishes the fact that you have a safety culture. I think if you define the behaviors that support your aspirations, and you consistently do those things from the top down all the time, and you recognize behavior, good and bad. So if folks are following your culture and doing the right behaviors that you've identified, you know, the culture will manifest and continue to. If folks don't do that, then you need to coach and correct them to get to the right thing. So reward the positive behavior, and have coaching and consequences to the negative behavior. But I really believe, and that's whether it's a long-standing culture or, you know, my business is highly acquisitive. As you come in and you look at new cultures and how you want to adapt, you define what are the key core cultural elements that you want to have, what are the behaviors that support those cultural elements, and then you consistently and in a very disciplined way make sure that you evidence those behaviors all the time. And if you choose to change your culture, you can do that as well. Again, you redefine what behaviors you want and use those, set the new expectations, and then model those consistently. But I really think it's a leadership driven thing. If the leaders don't model the appropriate behaviors, then no one else is either. So the title of this webinar, I think, is Who's Controlling Your Culture? And I think leaders do. And if they are cohesive and disciplined, you can create the kind of culture you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think where everybody is going is exactly true. I really like Cord's example on safety because that's such a visual example, right? It's visual, it makes sense to people, it's out there. And again, there's guardrails to understand real quickly what's right and what's wrong behavior, right? That doesn't align with the culture. I think when you get into the soft part of culture, you know, we'd all be wise to take Cord's example and apply that more often. Because what we're talking about is, does culture start at the top? And absolutely it does. The challenge is, how do you simulate that culture down through the organization? Because there's not those visual cues. There's not the yellow lines, right? And so the challenge of making a great culture, my opinion, is to be sure that you're setting the example from the leadership from the top, but then you have a very purposeful plan of getting that culture down through the organization, but then consistently reinforcing it. Culture is one of those things. That's like, you know, I always say, you either manage people's expectations or they create their own. And so it is one of those things where you have to manage expectations and manage behaviors. Let's use behaviors since we're talking about culture. You have to manage that on a very consistent basis. It has to be, you know, the drip, drip, drip that just doesn't end, because, you know, the minute you do that, then we're going to go back to and revert to the culture that perhaps we came from. I mean, that's the other challenge for culture for organizations, right? Any company is a conglomerate of people coming from other companies. And so they all come to your company with their culture. And so, you know, it's just one of those things that, you know, being very mindful and purposeful on how you bring that culture down through the organization is what I really think creates great culture. And that's not easy, because there's not the yellow lines. So it has to be very purposeful and intentional, and supported from an HR standpoint of view, supported in every single thing we do. When we talk performance management, I mean, we have a list of we have a pillar process, that's our culture, right? So we talk about the pillars of trust. We measure it in performance reviews. We measure it in goal setting. We talk about it in interviewing. We talk about it in disciplinary and assessment, you know, vehicles. We talk about it. And that's not the get all, right? I mean, there's still a lot more to it, but you've got to take every single opportunity that you can when you're in front of people. You know, every employee meeting, we talk about it. I mean, you just have to continue to get that out there. And, you know, and as we all know, culture is not something that changes overnight. I think statistically, they say it takes about 3 years to make a culture shift. So, you know, think about anything that you've said, okay, I'm going to set this goal and it's going to be 3 years long. I'm going to get up and run every morning at 6 a.m. Well, it's easy for the first month, but on the third year, if it's not into your process and into your behavior, it makes it hard. So I think those are the, you know, the fun, you know, and challenging things that everybody has to keep in mind, and we all need to keep in mind as we think about how do we shift culture.
It's so interesting, all the things we were talking about, and my personal experience has been it's easier to have a great culture and retain your best people when you have stability. And because a lot of what drives what makes people want to stay is clear expectations, clear goals, clear understanding, and alignment with where an organization is and feeling a part of that. And right now, what we're living is change. We're kind of in the whitewater of change. As soon as you think you're okay and you can breathe, here comes another wave. And I think for so many people, why we see so much change right now in organizations, but also with people really doing a lot of soul searching, is because of this change. I don't know what I can count on. It seems like everything is changing. And what I've seen when organizations have intentionally changed, not looking at these external factors, the pandemic, economic changes, but just chose to change, the best thing they could do was communicate. And communication is an education, because when you are a leader, you think you can say something once and everybody should remember it. And then they want to get very frustrated if someone comes and says, I don't remember you saying that. Because in change, you can only absorb so much information. So if you share something, you have to be willing to share it in the way that people expect you to share it, from your vision and values, the way that you say that you're going to operate as an organization. And you have to be patient on the journey. So when you, at some point, hopefully, we will all get back to a place of more stability. But in the meantime, you've got to give people communication. You've got to talk to them. There's an easy model, is from the Bridges Change model, which I absolutely love. You'll hear me talk about it all the time. And it's just the simple 4 Ps. It's tell people the purpose of what you're doing, the picture, the plan, and the part. But you've got to do it in different ways. You can't just stand up and say it once. You need to say it consistently. You need to make sure your leaders are sharing it. And you need to make sure that things tie together. And if you don't share, what I've found is that people make things up. And what they make up is significantly worse than the truth. Sometimes it can be closer to a horror story when what you're really moving to is quite exciting. So wrapping our arms around that communication piece, understanding that we are going to lose people when your organizations lack some type of stability, but taking control of that, and you can control it through communication.